welcome back to Joygasm, a video game and movie podcast. I'm Russ, and if you notice, Steve is actually, well, in the conference type of capacity right now on, what is it, May 29th, 2022. We want to be able to wish each and every one of you a very happy Memorial Day weekend. We're hoping you are all having a fabulous time. And for us, we, after a brief hiatus, if you recall, we didn't have an actual episode of Joygasm come through just because this fella caught COVID. And in terms of myself, I also got sick. But luckily, it was not COVID. It was just one of those annoying head colds that my daughter brought home from school. Our topic of the day is the Obi-wan Disney Plus impressions. This got dropped over the Memorial Day weekend of 2022. And not only did they drop the first episode, but they actually dropped the first two episodes. So we are going to be giving our impressions of that, going right into our topic of the day. But before we actually do start talking about that, Steve, it is very, very nice to see you, good sir, after all that you have been going through. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm still a bit congested. Still coughing a bit, so if everybody could forgive me for that, I appreciate it very much, but I'm feeling much, much better. The ailments have decreased quite a bit. No more temperature, no more throat, strep, pretty much what it felt like. It's, I'm feeling a whole lot better, Russ. It was, I never lost my sense of taste or smell, but, so I got probably one of the variants or something. I don't know, but
Delta or something.
Yeah. I took the COVID medication, I forgot what it's called, I don't know what it was called, but that was
essentially it's one of those
odd
medications that are very difficult to pronounce, as just about all of them are. Yeah.
Oh man, that's a whole story to itself. We could talk about another day, but anyway, I'm alive, getting better. I'm
Excellent.
Here, so yes, good to see you too.
And hopefully, maybe in like the next week or two, you will be back in the studio, and then we'll be able to banter on as we always do.
Yeah, been wanting to see Top Gun. I just feeling paranoid about going to the theater as of right now.
You should.
You know? But anyhow,
yes.
Obi-Wan!
Obi-wan Kenobi. This particular show has been on both of our radars in terms of we were very much interested and excited to be able to see this show commence, just because we're both fans of the character Obi-Wan Kenobi, and also the time period that this takes place, which is basically between episode 3 and 4, where we get to see Obi-Wan Kenobi not necessarily as an old man, but also not as like a sprightly young man either, and just what goes on during that time frame. And so I have a number of thoughts regarding the first two episodes. I gotta say, initially, for me, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I'm very, very happy with seeing Ewan McGregor back on screen again. Just having seen him play the role through the prequels, and then during this rather long stint of him no longer playing the character, and now him stepping back into the role again, I was really excited to see him, and it's just always a pleasure to be able to like see that part of it. I do think, and again, these are more high level thoughts that we'll kind of get more into the nitty gritty of, but I did think that there are certain aspects to it that need a bit more iteration, and that also, once again, you can tell that there are these story crutches that we've actually talked about in the past regarding other shows, but unfortunately, this is also starting to kind of fall into that. But what do you think, Steve? High level thoughts?
No, I'm on the same page. It's fantastic to see Ewan McGregor back in the saddle again. I haven't seen movies with him in it. That's been a minute. It's been a
It's been a while.
So I also think they did a great job of like giving you all this stuff, like video footage of movies that happened in the past, leading up to this point. I thought they did a great job with that.
I did like that as well. Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I think the show is falling into kind of like the similar makeup of what we've seen with Disney shows, kind of like with Star Wars and Marvel, where I mean, we will get into it in a little bit, I'm guessing, but it kind of makes me feel like, no, I don't see that the way it's happening, but I see that they have to push this narrative of the show, and they have to make a story of something that we would want to see. And so it's kind of a toss-up of, okay, yeah, thanks for making a show, because there was definitely something happening between episode 3 and episode 4. There was like a good, I don't know, 10 to 15 years there where stuff had to have happened. He wasn't sitting on his duff in the middle of the desert for that long. I mean, stuff had to have happened, right? Mm-hmm. So, but I don't know. I'm a bit skeptical, at least so far, of what I'm seeing. I'm not disliking it, but just a little skeptical, Russ.
I totally understand what you're saying. And, you know, I'd like to be able to kind of itemize this and go down bit by bit based off of some of the things that stood out to me, and I'm sure stood out to you as well. The first thing I want to talk about is it's actually a positive in my book. I really like the relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Uncle Owen, because in episode 4, the original Star Wars movie, you can tell that there was friction between the two men. How like it wasn't as if they were very simpatico with like how Luke should be raised, or you know, what Luke's calling should be.
They weren't.
And
besties.
I like, yeah, they're definitely not BFFs. But I do really love in these first initial episodes where like they continue down that path where like it's a relationship that's complicated, right? Like it's a relationship that was manifested more out of duty for the survival of the Jedi as well as the galaxy, you know, in order to try and figure out, and knowing that the Empire had won at that point in time.
Right.
And them trying to play the long game of like, well, this is going to be, you know, essentially like our only hope, as we all know so well. So I really like that. I love those certain scenes. You know, there was a scene where like the Uncle Owen comes and you know, tosses back the toys that Obi-Wan Kenobi had given. Basically, he gave that to Luke without Luke even knowing that Obi-Wan Kenobi exists. And it's interesting because I think that toy, if you look at it closely, was the same toy that in episode 4 you see Luke Skywalker kind of playing around with when he's cleaning R2-D2 and C-3PO. Do you recall that, Steve?
No, I don't.
Remember when C-3PO's like, oh, this bath's going to feel so good. And,
yeah.
And you see like R2's standing there, and then Luke is sitting kind of offset to the center of the frame, and you see him as he's lounging. He's got this like cool, I think it's a Skyhopper.
Yeah,
ship.
That's right.
And he you know, he's briefly kind of playing with it before he sets it down to continue cleaning the droids.
Yeah, I think I do remember that. He's kind of like, kind of flying it around a little bit.
I'm never going to get out of here.
Yeah, man.
So anyway, I like that nod because to me, at least, that was my interpretation of when I saw the toy, when I saw it in the bag. I was like, that looks an awful lot like that other particular toy. So that was really cool. I also liked the scene that was probably one of the most intense scenes that the first 2 episodes showed, which was you had one of the Inquisitors that was essentially threatening Uncle Owen's life as they were trying to find out where the Jedi are, right? And more specifically where Obi-Wan Kenobi was. I really like that, even after like that confrontation ended, and how Obi-Wan came over and showed gratitude by saying, you know, thank you for not giving me up, basically.
And he was like, and then I think he said like, I'm totally not saying it right, but he was basically saying, I didn't do it for you.
Right.
Like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I did it for Luke, not for you.
Right.
But
yeah.
What did you think of how the Inquisitor looked?
So the Inquisitors, so this is one of more of the critiques I have of the show so far, and I have multiple thoughts on this. And I knew this to a certain extent when I looked at the trailer for the show. Let's just go down this list. First of all, I don't like how they're dressed. I think that the wardrobe stylist or whoever the costume designer is needs to go back to the drawing board. I felt like each one of their costumes was very clumsily put together, and you can tell by the way that they walked. It's a very simple test, but like when you have an actor who's dressed up in their wardrobe and you see them walking on camera, it needs to flow organically and naturally. You can't have pieces and parts that are like bulging out awkwardly or like, I don't know, like especially when it comes to whether they're Jedi or Sith, whether they're in Sith Inquisitors or they're just a Sith in general. They're known for having just these flowing robes because of their athleticism. Like they are very athletic when it comes to their lightsaber duels, or if they're utilizing the space around them, or whatever it is, that they are doing some pretty incredible physical feats. And so when I looked at these Inquisitors, I would say probably the main one, the kind of the more the bald, pale skin looking kind of leader of the three, he especially just looks so cumbersome in his outfit. The other two not as bad, but at the same time too, they almost look kind of like Hasbro action figures. Like you would almost see them like in the packaging, as opposed to being these very scary, threatening, dread-filled types of characters. On top of that too, I felt as though, again, like Star Wars has such a certain type of visual style. And the pasty, bald, kind of leader of the trio there, he looked kind of more like he belonged in Star Trek instead of Star Wars. Like there were certain elements of his makeup that, it had more of a Star Wars kind of vibe to it. But overall, it just didn't work for me. And then the other two, it was interesting. Like there was one of them that was played by an Asian actor. I thought he looked pretty interesting. He was kind of cool looking. But again, if you look at the costume, all three of them have those really clumpy looking boots. Did you notice, like, as they were walking?
I didn't see the boots.
You didn't see the boots. Well, I was looking at the boots as part of the whole thing. And then, again, this is one of the things that stood out to me is like, they just had these really like clunky, clumpy looking kind of boots. Like, again, it's not form-fitting the way that I would expect a Sith to be dressed. Not that like they have to be form-fitting all over the place, but like especially when it comes to like, if you're wearing like, say, knee-high types of boot garb or whatever, it needs, you don't want to be tripping over yourself when you're engaging in combat and that sort of thing. So what did you think of the costumes overall?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on a lot of points. I couldn't really, I was looking at him last night and I couldn't really put it into words about why I didn't like it. It didn't look terrible, but they called themselves like Jedi hunters. And I think if you call yourself a hunter, you got to have movement, as you're saying, and you got to be agile. You're going to be sword fighting, lightsaber dueling, like you say, with a Jedi. And the Jedi is going to be jumping and moving all over the place because they can use the Force, and so they're going to be a lot more nimble. And so, yeah, it kind of their dress did not really make a whole lot of sense. Plus, I think that altogether, like with the makeup and everything, it just didn't look unique enough. Mm-hmm. I think for me, they just didn't really look different. They didn't have presence. Like, for example, the what's the guy's name who was in the Book of Boba Fett? He was the villain. He looked awesome when he came on.
Oh, I think you're talking about Cad Bane.
Cad Bane. I mean, he looked awesome. He looked really cool. I mean, he had presence. He's a villain that I want to see on screen.
Right.
But so far, the Grand Inquisitor and the third sister, and I think it was the first brother or something like that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I could take him or leave him, but they just didn't really have presence enough for me to really jump off my seat.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I mean, and I think that's yet another good point that's in my my itemized list is that, when you think of a Sith, the Sith in pop culture are one of the most iconic villains. It doesn't matter which Sith you are. If you're Senator Palpatine, who then turns into the Emperor, or if you're Darth Vader, Darth Maul, like you have a tremendous amount of iteration that has occurred on these villains, and also just in terms of kind of the connection that some of these Sith have. Like if you think of like Darth Sidious, for example, the name really corresponds to the persona of the Emperor himself. If you think of Darth Maul, like the name itself really corresponds with the persona of that character as well, and that he delights in combat. He delights in mauling his victims, so to speak, right? Like he had that even like when he was about to fight Obi-Wan Kenobi toward the end of episode 1, he's pacing back and forth almost like a lion at the zoo kind of thing. It really works well with that. And I think that when it comes to these Inquisitors, they lacked that presence, like what you talked about, where none of them had really any kind of like sense of dread to them. Like anytime you see one of these other Sith come on screen, whether it's the first time or later on or whatever, I mean, like you can tell these are not characters to be trifled with. And so I do think that was a bit of an issue. Another thing that I had that was a bit of an issue with the Inquisitors was that they, once again, there's this issue with a lot of the more recent Star Wars films and shows, not with all of them, but with a lot of them, where they don't spend enough time revealing these characters. Like we as an audience don't have enough time to be able to get to know these characters. So for instance, the Grand Inquisitor, who I would say, toward the end of what we see, I think, and by the way, I mean, I think it goes without saying that we're talking about spoilers here. So, yeah. But I apologize. We didn't say that at the top of the show. But yes, we do have spoilers in this episode regarding Obi-Wan. So, when you see the Grand Inquisitor toward the end of his lifespan in the show, it's like, well, we were just starting to kind of get to know who this character is, and then he gets killed, and it's like, well, that just, to me, I feel robbed as an audience member. And it reminds me, honestly, of Grandmaster Snope, where in the episodes 7, 8, and 9, it's like, once again, we come to discover that there is this particular character that does exist, that is high up within the First Order, but we don't really get to know the character at all because he gets killed so fast. And so I guess what I'm saying is that there's a pacing issue as it applies to character development. You have to be able to give all characters enough time on screen to be able to establish who they are and why we should care about them, whether we are rooting for them or not. And I feel like that was kind of a thing that I noticed. Did you pick up on that as well?
Yeah, I did. It was pretty disappointing on the second episode, especially because the Grand Inquisitor has a bigger name, and there's some history with him and the first sister that was established in episode 1.
The third sister.
Or the third sister. They were talking about how he picked her up from nothing and then trained her, and she's got basically a hot head. And then he just dies. And I wanted to see more of this story fleshed out if they're going to take the time to introduce us to these characters. And now he's gone. And the Grand Inquisitor was even more of, he had more presence than the third sister did. Right. She's just a person that's in black clothes, basically. And so now he's gone, and we have the first brother and the third sister. I don't know. I was pretty disappointed when I saw it happen yesterday. Okay, well, looks like that history's gone. I'm not going to look forward to seeing that in future episodes. He's dead. Maybe there'll be, somebody else, I mean, they hinted at Darth Vader that maybe we'll see some of him coming up in the episode, but anyhow, I just got to go back to why I introduced us to this character from the get-go, just to kill him off, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I thought about was a lot of the video game cinematics that we have seen within the Star Wars franchise have done a much better job, in my opinion, of really establishing these characters within a very short amount of time. Like if you think of like Blur Studio, for instance, they're one of the best video game cinematic vendors out there. And, if I think of like, the old MMORPG of like Star Wars, The Old Republic, they had these fantastic cinematics. In which case, first of all, you see these Sith that get revealed because they're attacking the Jedi at that point in time. It's to this day, it's still one of the best Star Wars cinematics, even when it comes to battle sequences. If you were to put that up with the Star Wars films, still one of the absolute best things to watch. And again, once that main Sith character comes on camera, you are immediately filled with dread. He immediately has that commanding presence of being a villain. And not only that, but if you recall in that particular cinematic, you see his master is there, and his master in one of those cinematics has been kind of, I would say, close to being mortally wounded. He's definitely wounded. And then you see that same Sith that we were initially introduced to take out his master, and you're just like, oh, that is so messed up. But that is such a Sith thing to do. And those cinematics were probably between 5 to 10 minutes long total. They didn't have a whole hour of pre-rendered cinematics to be able to go through this whole story and whatnot. However, in that short amount of time, I really got to know this particular character, and there wasn't like a sense of like, oh, this is a throwaway character or whatever. All these boxes were checked for me as a viewer when I was watching that. Do you recall that cinematic at all, Steve?
I don't think I do. No.
It was a while ago. I mean, and you didn't really play the game. It was for PC, but man, it was something that I thought about, because when it comes to the Inquisitors as well, I don't have an expert knowledge of like what the Inquisitors, like all the backstory of it. I know that they are a division, a faction of the Sith. But I am intrigued by kind of what their speciality is. And I just didn't feel like I was getting at least what I was expecting in my head visually from the trio that we saw there. Another thing that's worth mentioning too is the first time that we ever kind of got like exposure to like the whole like second sister, third sister thing was actually in the Star Wars game that came out by Respawn Entertainment. Remember that game? I
do not.
It was the game where like the main character is the redhead, and you have your
she was in that one? I guess so, huh?
Did you ever beat that game?
Yeah.
I want to say you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was in that one. That's right. First sister. Okay.
Yeah, it was either first sister or second sister, but I mean, she was the main villain that you were fighting against in that game. What was it? Star Wars Jedi Rising or Fallen
Order or something?
Something like that. Yeah, Fallen Jedi or Fallen Order or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, that boss fight.
they have a sequel coming out. Yeah, I apologize. I'm drawing a brain fart at this point in time. But that was the first time that we had actually seen or heard about this whole like idea of like a first sister, second sister, third sister type of setup. And again, if I'm comparing the two, I really love the fictional character that they developed within the game itself, because once again, let's go down the list. We didn't see her face for like half the game. Like she had her own type of helmet that she was wearing, which again, it instantaneously builds mystique. Not to mention that the Sith tend to they like to hide themselves a bit in that way. And then the character was very fascinating in terms of her background, her history, what we found out about her and everything else. And she still had her ferocity as a very competent fighter, when she's fighting against the Jedi. And then even at the end of the game, if you recall, Darth Vader comes in as like this huge surprise, and the performance on the animation of her face just reduces her to just being the scared little girl, because she knows who's behind her and she knows that she's about to die. I think that if I compare that to who they have playing as like a third sister or second sister or whatever it is in this show, I feel as though the casting was mistaken. I think that they need to have somebody else in this role, because I'm not buying into her being a Sith. It's nothing personal against the actress who's playing the role. I feel as though she doesn't have the type of presence, and I'm not saying that she has to have like a Darth Vader style presence, but I do think, once again, if I'm comparing her, who's a real actress, versus someone who is a digital character in a game, and they base like those types of looks and stuff off of like actual living folks and that sort of thing. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much of that, but I do think it's important to note that if you're comparing the two, for me personally as a viewer, I really was more connected and had more like I resonated more with the video game character of the second sister as opposed to what we saw in the show so far.
Well, I think that kind of goes towards the studio. Honestly, I'm thinking these game studios really have it down more so than Hollywood, at least today. It seems like the stories are better. And they can do so much more with CG because they can create exactly how they want the person to look versus, okay, you're coming in for interview. We're gonna see how you are on stage or on camera, and now it's your turn. Okay, this is our pick. Who do we have to choose with? Versus, okay, I can model this person however I want, and I can go ahead and tell the story. And I don't know. It just seems like the game studios nowadays really have it down.
They do
better than Hollywood, which my hat is off to them.
It was Jedi Fallen Order. I just looked it up just to make sure. Yeah.
There you go.
And they have a sequel coming out, which I'm very excited about. But yeah. Did you have any other thoughts on that?
No.
Okay. Moving on from there. So one of the other positives that I did have regarding the show was I loved going to Alderaan. That is Leia's home planet. Like that is one of the things that I think has always been very curious to all of us Star Wars fans, because, in episode 4, we see how the planet gets blown up, how Obi-Wan Kenobi is en route with Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon, and suddenly there's no more Alderaan. And so to be able to see that, we talked about how we were critiquing the wardrobe style of the Sith Inquisitors. How now on the plus side of things, I love the art direction of the planet Alderaan. Like, I really loved the buildings, the ships. Again, when we talk about the visual language and how does it correspond to a culture? How does it correspond to the types of lifestyles that are in existence within any given city or planet or country, whatever it may be? I really feel like they nailed it. What did you think?
No, I like, since you brought that up, one thing that stood out to me, which I haven't seen in a Star Wars movie before, was highways. And it's kind of an odd thing to say because, okay, a lot of their ships are flying here and flying there. Okay, great. But if you think about it, these civilized, like fully populated areas or planets or cities, however you want to, look at it, their civilization's got to commute. Excuse me. Their civilization's got to commute. They got to get to work. They have their normal lives, right? So, and not everybody is going to get into their own pod or their own ship, because then the sky is going to be crammed and people are going to be crashing into each other and falling out of the sky and whatnot. So they're most likely going to have highways with futuristic cars or futuristic buses, public transit, whatever you want to call it. But it looks more like an evolved, highly populated civilization. And so, I don't know. I thought that was the coolest thing. I know it was something just real puny and whatnot. But I just thought it was the coolest thing to see that this place did look royal. It did look like a capital. It did look like there was tons of people there. And I don't know whoever's idea it was to put highways and actual seeing people not just in a castle or in a.
You see infrastructure.
There you go, infrastructure. That's it. Yeah.
I do have to toot my own horn right now, just because if you recall, I had a prediction on this show, which was that Obi-Wan Kenobi would be forced to go off of Tatooine and take on like different missions. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I'm glad that that prediction came true, just because Tatooine, visually speaking, gets old and stale really fast, because there's only so much dune sea and sand and brown, basically, that like, you look at before you start to kind of get kind of bored. And so this was a fantastic example of like how he was compelled to go off world temporarily to go and save Leia, and how not only did we get to see Alderaan, but then we also got to see a second place that she was taken to. And I don't know if that was still on the planet of Alderaan, or if like they went to another planet. That's a little muddy for me. That was a different planet?
Different planet.
One of the other things too that is worth noting is that Flea was in this show.
That's right.
We are both big fans of Flea. I remember the last time I saw Flea in a movie, I think it was Back to the Future. And I mean, like here's a member of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and the dude has screen presence. Like every time he so does.
Yeah. Yeah. He was in Back to the Future. Plus, he was also in The Getaway with, I think it was not Martin Sheen, but Charlie Sheen. I think. Remember that? That was the movie with,
Yeah. So, and what's really funny about that is that Flea has his own style. Like there are times where like this kind of comes up as a topic, where when certain actors just have their own unique style that's very recognizable, very branded, and it's just so cool. And Flea is so one of those types that like he gets on camera and he's just unabashedly Flea. Like he, like, even the way he dressed, like, I mean, he looked like, this is, I admit this is a little bit of a critique, like a constructive criticism, but like, even the way he dressed, he looked like he stepped out of like Back to the Future Part 2 and was in there like kidnapping Leia. It was almost like this weird like multiverse kind of situation. But at the same time, I'm such a huge fan of Flea, I didn't even care. Like I was just like, this is awesome. Yeah. This was like a treat as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, that put a smile on my face, because I didn't recognize it until the jail cell scene.
Right.
And so when Leia was running and through the forest, and he goes, "Well, I'm waiting for you, princess. I'm waiting to get you." It didn't click. And it only clicked when Obi-Wan came to rescue Leia, and I got a closer shot of his face, and I was like, "That's Flea." Then I put a smile on my face, and any kind of costume or whatever like went out the door, because I was so stoked to see him in a Star Wars flick. Anyway. Good choice for him.
And it's also worth noting too, again, one part of the secret formula of what makes a successful Star Wars film is you hire actors that are not easily recognizable. That's why you don't want to have someone who's, say, Tom Cruise, for example, right? Like Tom Cruise is a great actor. He really does a fantastic job in the types of films that he does, but he wouldn't fit. He wouldn't work in Star Wars because he's such a recognizable actor. You have to cast the really unknowns, and Flea is one of those like anomalies within Hollywood where like you don't see him very often, but when you do, he leaves such an impression on you as a viewer. I thought that was definitely one of the high points for sure. And I think he fits in Star Wars, honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
We're getting low on time, so I just want to briefly also talk about how we have Leia, so there is definitely this conscious effort to like both examine Luke Skywalker as well as Princess Leia, and I did like how they're going with Obi-Wan being introduced to Leia now as a little girl, I thought that was really cool because Obi-Wan doesn't get introduced to Luke Skywalker until episode 4 when he's like 17, 18 years old, right? So it is interesting to see how there is this relationship, which again, it does plug right into how Leia knows about Obi-Wan Kenobi already. That's why she sends him the message. Again, all of that is really, really great. The constructive criticism I have regarding Leia is I feel as though she's a little too like bratty.
Yeah.
And what's weird is that, she was raised within this, kind of like this royal-esque kind of family, right? Like she was born into this family that has, that social etiquette, front and center. And I understand how they want to give her rebellious spirit and that sort of thing, because that is a part of who Leia is. But if I were to compare the girls, portrayal of the character versus Leia as Carrie Fisher had this lovable type of fighting spirit that everybody could get behind. Whereas this girl, I feel like had just a more of like just being disobedient for the sake of being disobedient and just being being annoying. Did you agree?
I would definitely agree. It was a bit cliche, I think, because from the get-go, she did come across as intelligent. I mean, she was standing up to her cousin. But then I thought, well, I kind of see where this is going. They need to push the story. So I can definitely see her getting rebellious, running away, causing trouble. And, that's pretty much what they gave us.
Yeah. So what are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts, I'm still very, very curious. One thing I wanted to say was that I didn't really care that in the time that Obi-Wan was in the desert, he really kind of struggled with finding his use of the Force, and like he was struggling. He didn't want to use it because he didn't want to reveal himself. But then again, when Leia was falling in the city because of her own doing, she wouldn't listen to Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan then has to use the Force, but it's a struggle. And I didn't really buy into that. I didn't think that, everything that we've seen with Obi-Wan and all the training that he received, and then a few years go by and now he's struggling to use the Force. I just didn't buy it, but definitely looking forward to seeing what they do with the show and with future episodes.
Awesome. We just lost your video feed, by the way, so it's back on yours truly.
Nice.
But yes, I'm glad that you brought that up, because in my final thoughts, part of what I was noticing and I appreciated was that Obi-Wan Kenobi as a character is in this transitional period where he's no longer in his 20s like we saw in episode 1 and even 2. Like, we've kind of seen this progression of the character where like he was in his 20s and he was just very physically adept. We then see him in his 30s and he's more into like a mentor type of role with Anakin. And then now we're kind of seeing him more as if he's in his like 40s, 50s, somewhere around there, where he's beginning to age. And not only that, but like, he has a lot of weight on him, both philosophically and emotionally, and even like some of the perhaps the physical toll of what he had to endure when he was younger is starting to kind of mount up on him a bit. Like he's not a feeble old man that like we saw in episode 4, but he's definitely going down that path. And I think that is definitely a thumbs up as far as I'm concerned, because that is something that he as a character has to deal with. And that's honestly something that people in my age group can relate to, because there is that kind of middle-aged man going more toward being more older as you go along. You're not old enough to be a senior citizen, but at the same time, you are starting to discover various types of limitations you have. And so I appreciated how he wasn't just some invincible Jedi, how like even him being out of practice, right? He had to kind of dust off the skills, so to speak, and be able to match, fisticuffs, so to speak, right? Like you saw Obi-Wan Kenobi bleed. You saw him struggle with trying to like, once again, use the Force to be able to focus on certain things. And I found myself really appreciating that. And I think that like as time goes on, we will revisit how him getting older is a little bit more of a challenge, but at the same time, that causes him to rely more on the Force, because as we all know, like Yoda was the one to talk about how size doesn't matter, how, you know, being 900 years old doesn't matter, you know, like, you know, it's important to, you know, the Force is your ally, right? You've got to rely on that. And so I, for one, I'm looking forward to seeing how that progresses, how like, it'd be great for it to like see him commune with Qui-Gon Jinn. You know, if we get some Liam Neeson goodness back into the fold again, that would be fantastic. So I would say overall, I'm still having a positive outlook on the show. I do think there are certain things like budget limitations. And again, it's becoming kind of like a pattern that we're seeing with Disney Plus shows where for whatever reason, they seem to go down this kind of, downtrodden kind of road, so to speak. And it's just kind of an unfortunate byproduct of the situation. But my hope is that they're able to have more of an introspective look into Obi-Wan Kenobi in terms of where his place is in the galaxy. And another thing too that I forgot to mention earlier was that one of the tropes that I'm noticing that we've talked about too in the past is how you have this relationship where you have this very capable character that's a survivor and may be asked to go on a mission or do something like that. And then what happens is you have this little kid, right? Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's Mando and Grogu or if you're talking about the Bad Batch and you have
that's what I was thinking of. Yep.
Yeah. You have the little girl in there and then you have the stormtroopers. And then, you know, here we have Obi-Wan Kenobi and we have little Leia. It's like, okay, you guys, not only has this already been done, this has been done repeatedly within the same universe. It's not like, oh, there's Indiana Jones and they have like this new type of setup, or, oh, here's, you know, whatever, here's a Marvel movie. No, like literally like all of these instances have taken place within the Star Wars universe. You've got to cut the umbilical cord, so to speak. Don't use that as a story crutch, because it's, you know, you're going to burn out the significance and the novelty of that. Do you agree with that, Steve?
I would definitely agree. And it just seems like, I think Disney is they don't either know that the Star Wars fan base has become older. Like we've been fans of Star Wars since basically we were born, because a lot of this stuff came out even before we were born. And so there's a lot of older diehard fans of Star Wars, and Disney wants there to be newer, younger fans of Star Wars. But I think they're not walking the line very well with appeasing both markets, because even if you're a teenager and you want to watch Star Wars, you're really going to want to see what the big kids do, or the adults, because that's where the cool stuff happens, not the kids that are running around being rambunctious. That's not why you watch Star Wars. And so I think they're kind of playing, I'm not going to say a dangerous game with fire, but I just don't think they know the fan base well enough, as opposed to like, let's say, for example, Jon Favreau with The Mandalorian. I mean, there's a reason why that was done so very well. Even Mando is carrying around Grogu, who's a child, but Grogu isn't this rambunctious little kid just trying to get into trouble. And Grogu has a lot more presence. And I don't know, that's why the Mandalorian, I think, did so well, was because they didn't focus on the big guy trying to scurry around, trying to find the little kid and keep the kid out of trouble and prove himself. He doesn't have to prove it to anybody. Right. So yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, and I 100% agree with it.
Well, that wraps up this episode of Joygasm. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to check out patreon.com/Joygasm, where you can enjoy exclusive perks and early access to the show, not to mention it financially helps us continue doing the show. Also, why don't you force push that subscribe button, maybe wield a lightsaber at that notification bell. That way you will not miss a single episode of Joygasm. It drops once a week, every week. And while you're at it, do a search for @Joygasm TV on your favorite social media platform of choice. We're on just about all of them. And you'll be able to see all kinds of fun behind the scenes goodies on there. Last but not least, do a search for Joygasm TV on Twitch to see us stream our gaming adventures live every Wednesday night at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. In fact, right now, you'll be able to catch either myself or Steve as we continue to make our way through Elden Ring. So
and now I can Twitch by myself.
We got Steve back up online for doing some twitching.
Friggin' A.
We will look forward to hanging out with all of you next week when we review Top Gun 2 Maverick. We'll see you then.